Hi there, AP World students. This is Mr. Everton, and this is a video about the Atlantic Revolutions in between 1750 and around 1850. And some of this the first half of this we went over in class on Friday, but for the sake of just making sure you have access to all of this information, I thought it'd be useful if I recorded the whole video. I'm not in class today because I had some issues with my car, so I took the day off so I could get my car taken care of. And I'm recording this video so that you can get the notes that you need while I am absent. So I'm just going to repeat this stuff. I'm going to not over and over. I'm not going to repeatedly say like we went over this on Friday, but you'll know if you were in class on Friday, you'll know the parts we went over on Friday, and you can skip ahead to the part that you need, or you can listen to this again if it's useful for you. So when we talk about revolutions in world history, it's useful to think about the different parts of a revolution. And usually the way things work is you have an established order, you have an established way of doing things with a government and social hierarchy and an economy, and it tends to benefit to the people at the top of the social hierarchy, obviously. And eventually people in the lower levels of the social hierarchy, the twos and the threes, become frustrated. And if they become frustrated enough, this can lead to a violent overthrow of the government and the social order. Um, and then usually what happens is a new government is put in place, and it tends to be somewhat moderate, right? It tries to retain some of the old ways of doing things, but address the problems that led to the overthrow of the original social order. But usually there's disagreement in the new government, in this new moderate government. There's usually going to be a moderate element that wants to try to preserve tradition and keep things like not that radical. And then there's a radical element that wants to just like turn everything upside down and institute really radical, dramatic change. And that usually leads to more conflict between the moderates and the radicals, which then is eventually resolved as one side or the other wins out and takes control and establishes a new order, a new way of doing things. And usually when we're looking at these revolutionaries, we're looking at the ones who are the wealthy elites who are dominating the government and the social class and the economy. And then we have a wealthy middle class who have access to education and have access to land and resources, but they're not running things, they're not in charge. And then at the bottom, we have the working class. And not always just the working class, but like everybody else. Okay, one moment. Peter, I'm doing a video for class, okay? So, so usually what happens is the twos, because they have access to education and they've been reading their Enlightenment philosophy, they get all angry about the ones and want to get rid of the ones, and then they're the ones who go to the threes and say like, hey, we need to get rid of these ones, and then everything will be great. But then usually what happens is once the wealthy elites are displaced and removed, the twos become the new ones. And they're delighted, right? The twos get everything that they wanted, whereas the threes typically end up not being that excited because they retain their status as workers and not that much actually changes for them. So we have four different revolutions to look at. The American Revolution, we've got the British who are running things, and then we've got a landed aristocracy, wealthy, white landowning men in the Americas, people like Washington and Jefferson. And then we have working class people. And then at the very bottom of the social hierarchy, we have enslaved people who have been brought over from Africa. And so we've got these colonial landowners. And because Britain becomes distracted during much of the 1700s, they're not paying as much attention to their American colonies. And so these colonial landowners begin to develop autonomy. They're able to do things for themselves, and they get used to that and they like it. And then once the 7 Years' War or the French and Indian War happens in the 1750s, the British become more interested in their colonies, and they want to maximize the profits that they're making from these North American colonies. And when they try to reassert control and try to make more money off of the colonies, the colonial landowners become enraged, and they start invoking all of this Enlightenment philosophy, the John Locke and the Jean-Jacques Rousseau and everything. And they start talking about no taxation without representation, and they take that to the working people, the threes, and get them all fired up. And so the twos and the threes team up, and they get rid of the British. They overthrow British control of the North American colonies with French support. They needed help from France, more on that in a minute. And this leads to a colonial victory in the early 1780s and the creation of a new constitution in what would become the United States of America in 1789. And so this constitution, if you look at it, on the one hand, there's some revolutionary elements to it in that it's creating a democracy, a representative democracy with three branches of government like Montesquieu advocated for. But on the other hand, the people who are dominating that democracy are wealthy land-owning men, white men. And if you look at actually who gets to vote in that democracy, it isn't until the 1820s that people who don't own property get to vote. It isn't until after the Civil War that any black people get to vote, and it isn't until 1920 that women get to vote. So the question then becomes, how revolutionary is the American Revolution? There's some revolutionary elements to it. There's some non-revolutionary elements to it. And you got to think what changed and what stayed the same. All right, the French Revolution. The French Revolution, we've got a king at the top. In this case, his name is Louis XVI. And then we've got these three estates. We've got the clergy, who are the first estate, and we've got the nobility, who are the second estate. And they own property and pay no taxes. And then we've got the third estate, which is made up of everybody else, the peasants, but also a new group of people called the bourgeoisie. And bourgeoisie is just French for middle class. And so the only group that pays any taxes are the third estate, which is clearly unfair and clearly is going to make the third estate unhappy. And then France begins to have economic troubles, in part because they helped pay for the American Revolution. They helped support the American Revolution as the Americans defeated the French enemies, the British. And then you have a variety of other problems, including a drought, which leads to famine, and the peasants are starving while the clergy and the nobility are continuing to eat fairly well. And there's enough problems with the economy that the king, King Louis XVI, calls a meeting of the Estates General. He calls a meeting of representatives from the clergy, the nobility, and the third estate. And they all come together. And the plan is that they're supposed to come up with a way to fix the French economy. But what really happens, what ends up happening, is the third estate says this is unfair, and we want to have real change. We want to have we want to have a legislature that will check the power of the king. And the king tries to deny them the ability to do that. And so they take off on their own and form something called the National Assembly in 1789. The National Assembly begins to work for real change. There's violence. They storm the Bastille on July 14th of 1789. They come up with a Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, in which they outline all the kinds of changes that they want to make to France. And so they've established this National Assembly and they've taken power away from the king. And then the most radical element of the National Assembly is called the Jacobins. And the Jacobins are very worried that traditionalists, conservatives who are pro the monarchy, who are in favor of Louis XVI, are going to try to restore the monarchy and get rid of the revolution. And so they begin executing people who they think are enemies of the revolution. And they become worried that somebody's going to try to reinstate Louis XVI. And so they have Louis XVI executed, as you see here. They also end up executing tens of thousands of members of the nobility. They end up ending the Roman Catholic Church in France. And so the king is removed, the clergy are removed, and the nobility are removed. And the only thing that's left are the peasants and the bourgeoisie. And they come up with this governing body called the Directory that is supposed to make all the decisions for France. Now, because having the King of France executed is really scary for all of these other European powers like Austria and Prussia and Great Britain, all of those European powers declare war on France and begin attacking France to try to undo the revolution. And the French army fights them off, led by a very charismatic general named Napoleon. And Napoleon is a really successful general who's able to defeat all of these other powers of Europe for some time and take over huge amounts of land, and he ends up declaring himself emperor. He eventually loses and is kicked out, and he's exiled, and the other powers of Europe, Britain and Prussia and Austria and Russia, all reinstate the monarchy. And so again, you're left with the French Revolution. How revolutionary was it? There were some very revolutionary ideas. They ended up killing the King of France, but then Napoleon declares himself emperor, and eventually a monarchy is reestablished in France. So it's revolutionary, but it's not. How much changed? How much stayed the same? The Haitian Revolution. Haiti is a was a French colony in the Caribbean, which the French called Saint Domingue, and it was an incredibly profitable colony, probably the most profitable colony in the world, and it grew huge amounts of sugar, which was very profitable, and also coffee. And there was a huge slave population. Slaves outnumbered all the other groups of people on Haiti. The French, who owned things, who were the ones, they lived in France, and then there were white overseers called the Grand Blancs, or the Big Whites, who ran the plantations, and then everybody else was a three. And then when the French Revolution happened in 1789, the enslaved population of Haiti hears about this, and they're all like, well, shoot, if the people of France are doing this, then like, what's to stop us from doing it? And so all over Haiti, enslaved people rise up and take their machetes and go kill their masters, and begins a 20-year war between the enslaved population of Haiti, led by Toussaint Louverture, pictured here, who was a former slave, who was a gifted military strategist who led the people of Haiti against the French, and eventually then later the Spanish, and then the French again. And they were successful. They were able to kick out the French and establish their own government run by formerly enslaved people. They abolished slavery and created a new country governed by black people. However, the problem is that this was way too radical for every other country in the world. Well, every other white country in the world, like America, which had a sizable population of enslaved people, did not like this. France, obviously, did not like this. And so all the countries of Europe and the United States refused to acknowledge Haiti, refused to trade with Haiti. And later in the 1830s, France actually came back and used military force to force Haiti to pay reparations to France, which meant that the Haitian economy never really got off the ground. And that is the reason why Haiti is an impoverished nation today with very low levels of development. So once again, we have this question of like, how revolutionary was the Haitian Revolution? It was quite revolutionary in many ways, but then like, to what extent did the other existing powers of the country allow this to stand? And what kinds of punishment were they able to put onto the new nation of Haiti to punish them for daring to challenge the existing social order and the existing power system? Okay, finally, we've got South American revolutions. In Latin America, when Spain took over Latin America, we talked about the casta system. And at the top of that social hierarchy is a group of people called the Peninsulares. And they're called that because they're from the Iberian Peninsula, which is where Spain and Portugal are located. So they're born in Europe. They're white people from Europe. And then the children of the Peninsulares are called Creoles. And a Creole is a white person who is born in the Americas. And then below that we have every other person, the mestizos, the mulattoes, the free blacks, the indigenous peoples of America, the enslaved peoples who've been brought from Africa. All those people are the threes. And so the Peninsulares are owning everything. The Creoles, very much like in the American Revolution, like the founding fathers, they have land and education and power, but they don't have enough to make them happy. They want to have more political power. And so these Creoles decide that they would like to kick the Peninsulares out. And when Napoleon begins his conquests in Europe, he actually conquers Spain. And when he does that, the Creoles see this as a great opportunity. And they're like, oh, well, we've got to use this opportunity to kick the Peninsulares out. And there was division between the Creoles. Some Creoles were loyalists, just like in the American Revolution. There were loyalists to the British crown. Some Creoles were loyal to the Spanish crown. And they're like, eventually Napoleon's going to go away and we just need to hold on to these colonies for the Spanish. But there were radicals who wanted to kick the Peninsulares out. And the leader of these these radical Creoles, was named Simon Bolivar. And once Napoleon was gone, the Spanish came back and tried to reassert their control of their Latin American colonies, leading to a series of wars fought between between the countries that would be, what would become the nations of Latin America, led by Simon Bolivar. And they were successful. They did win, and they did establish new Latin American nations. But all of these nations were led by Creoles, and these Creoles were often quite corrupt, and they controlled all of the land. And a lot of times, they ended up selling the land to they ended up selling the land to other wealthy people, other American corporations and corporations from other countries, instead of giving land to the people so that the peasants were able to have land to work. They would sell these lands to wealthy business interests from overseas. So again, how revolutionary were the South American revolutions? On the one hand, Spain is no longer running Latin America, but on the other hand, like, how radical is it when we basically get rid of one wealthy landed uh, aristocracy and we replace them with another? Anyway, so what you're going to do now is, on Canvas, you're going to rank the revolutions in order from most to least radical. And then you're going to defend that ranking with evidence from your notes from this lecture and also from your reading for chapter 21. And this is what the slide looks like. So you're just going to make a text box for each of the revolutions, and you're going to place it on the spectrum from least revolutionary to most revolutionary. You should have all four of the revolutions: the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the South American or Latin American revolutions. And then you're going to defend your ranking in complete sentences in the box provided. And once you're done with that, you are finished with the lesson. And I will be back in class on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I will see you then. And I hope you have a good day.